Yes, guys, welcome to the Adelaide Crows expose in what can only be described as a disappointing season. There were such high hopes at the beginning of the season, and it ultimately delivered a 15th place. I know I had the Crows at least in my top 8 at the beginning of the season, and it just broke down, didn't it? And it wasn't really where you expected it. I remember being worried about the defence, and really the areas that struggled were forward of the ball, their connection, and they just didn't have that same spirit, that same, will to want to attack the ball, win the contested football and pressure like they did in 2023. I want to start this conversation around what I titled the video. So I called it the Conservative Crows, and that's potentially a little bit inflammatory, but it does speak to a club that I think they are making consistently across different areas of the football department. Too many conservative decisions, and they're playing catch up a little bit. I'll start with Matthew Nicks, who has been a big talking point throughout the season, a lot saying that he's not getting the best out of the players that he has. I know David King, I remember listening to SEN at one point earlier in the season when the losses started to mount up, and he was defending him pretty vehemently on the fact that this is a list management or a talent issue. I certainly think there's some truth in that, and there's particularly a few drafts through the, between 2010 and 2020 where it hasn't really worked out for them, but I'm not sure you can pin all of that on the recruiting staff, and we'll go into the nuts and bolts of what that is. I think the midfield really does lack that talent level, just that absolute X factor level. And I think some of that's on Matty Nicks as well, the way that he's deployed some of these players. I think the defense still, even though it did actually stack up pretty well in the 2024 season, it still lacks a little bit of potency and ability to be able to win the ball back off the opposition. I think that's still a worry. We'll go to that big talking point that is the recruiting. There's been several, videos and articles written on about how many top first round draft picks the Crows have had. 2014, picks inside the top 30. They had Jake Lever at pick 14. Now, he obviously leaves the club, goes to Melbourne. That's not the recruiter's fault though. So they've recruited an absolute superstar player there. One of the best intercept defenders, and how Adelaide would love to have Jake Lever at the club right now. In 2015, they drafted Wayne Miller at pick 11 and Tom Duday at pick 15. And while those two players, Duday arguably, has been a real hit, gone to Brisbane obviously. Wayne Miller certainly hasn't lived up to a pick 11 standard, but I think everyone can see that the talent is definitely there. And he's showed a lot at different times throughout his career. He's looked like he could have been a really high-level AFL player and just hasn't really quite got there. So that's where you start to have this discussion about development versus recruiting, right? 2016, Jordan Gallucci, that really just goes down as a miss. That was pick 15. The only thing that I'll say about the Jordan Gallucci one, in that 2016 draft, there are worse misses even further up the draft bed than that. So it's not the worst. It's definitely not even the worst miss of 2016, but it's certainly a bad pick. 2017, they get pick 12 and they get Darcy Fogarty, who, again, he was one of the most exciting players in that draft. He enters the AFL, he comes in, he looks really, really good, and then he sort of plateaus for a few years. I do think Darcy Fogarty is a good player, and I think he will come good, but there's an issue around talent coming in and then just sort of, plateauing, shriveling up, dying. Darcy Fogarty fits that a little bit as well. 2018, I think this is a couple of years where you can pin it on the recruiters, right? So 2018, Chase Jones at pick 9, Ned McHenry at pick 16, Will Hamill at pick 30. Like Jones and McHenry still at the club, obviously. Like Jones, pick 9. I can't believe he was a pick 9. He just doesn't seem like that quality of a player. I think he's an AFL quality player, but it's obviously too high. 2019, they go Fisher McCasey at pick 6, the 197 centimetre key defender. He quits during or just after the COVID period, and that's an absolute disaster. A top 10 pick that plays about 10 games for your club and then quits. And the thing that you can pin there on the recruiters is, I suppose, looking at the character, doing all that work on the player beforehand with the interviews and all of that sort of stuff, and then ultimately, they can't. It's unlucky they can't foresee that sort of thing, but I suppose the really top-level clubs with their recruiting, the ones that get it right every single time, they would really wear that as a badge of honour, being able to, pick a character, pick a player that they know is going to, stay put at their club, and then back their culture around that as well. And that all comes into that football department conversation, having the culture already there so that people want to stay and people can thrive there. So that same draft at 24, Harry Schoenberg, again, I reckon if you go back to the first couple of years of Harry Schoenberg, he looked really explosive. He looked like a great midfielder, sort of forward of centre player, and just plateaued, not really even playing senior football anymore. And then they got Josh Worrell at 28, who looks like a good player. So, yeah, there's a couple of misses here, but it's not like they're consistently drafting, substandard players. There's certainly talent there. And when they first come on the scene, they look like there's a real high-level talent, but they're not going on for whatever reason. 2020, they get Riley Thilthorpe with pick 2. Looks like an absolute beast. Looks like a player there. He's competitive. He's good in the air. He's pretty good at ground level for his size as well. I don't see any issues with that pick. Luke Pedler at pick 11. Albeit he maybe looks a little bit lacking quality for a pick 11, he's still been really impactful at AFL level. He's plateaued again this season, but his last season was really good, and I think he'd get into most teams as that sort of high half forward, worker bee type player that can get up the ground, affects stoppage, he's physical, he's powerful. I don't really see a problem with that pick. Braden Cooks played some decent footy with pick 25, and Sam Berry, another player, looked really explosive, really good as a mid-forward type player, and has plateaued, played as the sub a lot this season, feels good enough to be playing in this side, and I don't really get all of this, to be honest. 2021, Josh Rachele at pick 6. He looked the best player in the comp when he came in. He's so skillful. He's one of the most mercurial half forward, small forward types, not dissimilar to a Harry Sheasel who was in the next draft. They get Jake Saligo at pick 36 in that same year, who's a real talent as well. And then 2022, which is the last one I'll cover here, is Max Michelini with pick 17 as a father-son, and he's been some player for them. On top of that, throughout that entire period, they've brought in Jordan Dawson, Isaac Rankin, and Mitch Hinge. So as far as recruiting goes, of getting players from other clubs, they've been absolute smash hits. Jordan Dawson, Isaac Rankin have gone to A+ level players since they've come to Adelaide. Mitch Hinge, they've been able to turn him into a delisted player that they've brought back through and become a really good running defender that can sort of intercept a little bit as well. I think if you're going to pin anything on the recruiters, it would maybe be a little bit of a lack of conviction around the type of player that they want to bring in. I think it's more difficult for interstate clubs. They have to look at, they often don't want to go for those Vic Metro type players where a lot of the talent is, so they do have to get a little bit crafty. They have to think about character and those sorts of things, and maybe Adelaide have sort of missed one there. But I would say, looking at all those players, looking at the draft history and the entire recruiting picture, the recruiters aren't getting it wrong that often. And there just seems to be a malaise at Adelaide that players come in, they show a lot of promise in their first season, and then it starts to plateau. And I know all about this. I'm a North Melbourne supporter. We have the exact same issue, right? We get draft picks in, we get high draft picks in, they just plateau a little bit. They just don't really have that development. I think that started to change in the last couple of years, but we had that for 5 to 10 years. There's just something a little bit rotten at the football club, whether it's at board level, people can't come to work and sort of do their job and absolutely thrive as an elite level professional. And I think Josh Rachele is a bit of a microcosm for that at the moment. That incident that happened in the season with the celebrations, and I know that Josh Rachele this season has been underwhelming. He's had a few incidents where he's pulled out of the contest and he hasn't been that, just that having that competitive level and the non-negotiable part of his game. And that's a massive issue, don't get me wrong. And make the statement when he does that. If you want to drop him and you want to go down that harder line, if you're Matthew Nicks, do it when that happens. Don't do it when he celebrates a goal and has a little bit of fun and shows a little bit of personality. Bring it to the club, because it just looks like, to me, if I was Josh Rachele and I was in that situation, I'd be just like, why are they targeting me for just doing something that's in my character, in myself? You don't want robots. You don't want players, coming in there and having to be super boring and just doing what everybody says, because they won't be able to get to that top level. And that's why I have sort of earmarked that and made that title of the Conservative Crows, because It just seems to, wash over everything that they do at the moment. The club's personality is conservative. Rory Laird is conservative, and even the game plan, in a way, is a little bit conservative as well. So I certainly think there has to be a bit of a change in demeanour there, and whether that means personnel change, but there definitely has to be a personality change within the way that people can behave and the way that people can, express themselves and play and be creative and all of those sorts of things. Because Josh Rachele, what an asset he is. I think he's one of the most talented players. He's a potential blue chip A-grade player at this club in a position that they need. He should be the Harry Sheasel forward of centre, mid-forward type that the Crows absolutely are crying out for and would complement their developing midfield. And these are the positives for the Crows. Their average age is 24.8, which is the third youngest in the comp. They've unveiled some young guns this year. Zach Taylor, Billy Dowling, Jake Saligo as, emerged as that A-grade midfielder. And the 15th place finish, which is, if you're looking for a silver lining, they now get picks 4 and 25 in the draft, and they can bring in that midfield piece that I think they're crying out for massively. They also have Tyler Welsh coming through as well as a nice bit of a third tall there as well. The trade rumours are circling around, obviously, Alex Neil-Bullen. He looks destined to come to Adelaide. Lukosius is a little bit more iffy, and when you do take into consideration, you've got Fogarty there, you've got Tyler Welsh who'll be waiting in the wings. Jack Lukosius may be a little bit surplus to requirements. I think he's a talented enough player that you'd still go for him, but you wouldn't want to give up an amazing amount of draft capital for Jack Lukosius, I wouldn't have thought. We'll get into the team lineup for 2025, all of the players, the contract situations, all of that kind of stuff, and see who we're going to cut, who we're going to trade, who we're going to keep, what the 2025 starting lineup is going to be. We'll start with the key defenders, and it's been a bit of a mess with the backs, just availability, I think they've actually performed pretty well this, back six for most times throughout the season. It's just hard to know who the preferred combinations and the preferred roles are actually going to work with the injuries that we had. And I just worry that for opposition teams with this Crows backline, if you're an opposition team kicking long down the line, who are you actually worried about down there? You can kick freely long, and there's not a huge amount of jeopardy that the ball's going to slingshot back at you with these guys being able to disrupt and intercept the ball. So we've got players like Murray, Worrell, Butts, Keane, Borlase in the key defender stocks. The first one I want to talk about is Nick Murray. I think he's probably still the mainstay, number one key lockdown defender that's going to take those bigger bodies. He's 24, so he's still in a really good age bracket. 195 centimetres, so he's tall enough without being an absolute giant. He's played 55 games now, so he's starting to get that experience going. Only the 9 games in 24 because of the ACL injury, so he returned in round 14, and I think he is he's still their best lockdown defender from that point of view. He's contracted until 2025, so don't have to worry about that until at least next year, and I think you just plonk him there as the centrepiece, the lockdown guy in this defence. And you partner him with the emerging Josh Worrell, who was picked 28 in the 2019 draft. He's done really well as a starter this season for 13 games, 5.9 for intercept possession. So he does intercept the ball. He doesn't mark the ball quite enough as that sort of second defender. I would like to see him, especially in 2025, you'd like to see those intercept mark numbers if you can sort of be a bit of a double sort of threat in there as a defender. He does lock down pretty well though, contracted until 2027. And I just think he works with the age profile, the talent profile to get this defense just up to, top 8, top 4 kind of standard defenses. And then the third one for the on-field position, and I've done this purely from the need of an interceptor. I think the best interceptor for the Crows in 2024 at least was Mark Keane. I don't think he's an ideal player for this role, but he's 194 centimetres, so he has the height. He seems to have the athleticism. He's only 24 years of age, played 21 games actually in 2024, so it's actually surprised me a little bit how many he played. Averages 17 disposals per game. He averages 317 metres gained per game, 2.4 intercept marks, which is first for the Crows, and 7.9 intercept possessions, which is first for the Crows. So he actually is their best intercept player. Surprised me a little bit that it wasn't probably someone with a bit higher pedigree of a player. one of those other key defenders or even a smaller defender doing that work like a Mitch Hinge or someone. But Mark Keane seems to be, of the current players, of these key tall types, is the one that is doing the best work from an intercept perspective, and you really do need that player to win the ball back. Ball Aces there, who played 10 games this season, and Jordan Butts played 15, who have been starters for this team. But, Ball Ace was in and out of the side. He didn't really impact too well. Jordan Butts, he's definitely a good one-on-one guy, but I don't know if you'd play him for wanting to play, give more exposure to a player like a Josh Worrell, and you also don't want to go too tall. I think at times, obviously, Butts will play, but he might be in and out of the side in 2025. The small defenders, you want plenty of run out of these guys, and if you do have Keane there as that third tall defender taking intercepts, you don't need that as much. Luke Nankervis was the player that really impressed me coming in, and another one, I didn't mention him at the beginning, but he's one that the Crows have unearthed through this, disastrous season. That's one of the positives, I guess. 20 games, 21 years of age, nice size at 189 centimetres, and he's not just an aerial player. He's definitely a running type defender. He's played a little bit of wing as well throughout the season. He was a rookie pick too. So again, you talk about the recruiting. What a steal he was with a rookie pick in 2021. Contracted until 2025, so he's still got 1 year on the deal. Sorry about that. So he'll slot in there as one of the running defenders. Then you've got Max Michelini, who's just such a versatile player. He played a little bit of midfield. I don't think his long-term home is there. I think he's going to be in that back six. Plays the lockdown role. And I think, is Michelini the player that can elevate this defence to a top 8, a top 4 level defence? Can he be that medium interceptor in the likes of a James Sicily and be one of the star key defenders of the competition? He's still only 20 years of age. He played 23 games this season. He's played 45 games. So he's starting to get, into his second, third, fourth season here. Contracted until 2026. I think this could be the year that Max Michelini goes absolutely bang from an intercepting point of view. Then the other one you've got there is Mitch Hinge, who simply just doesn't win the ball back enough off the opposition. He's a good running defender. His ball use is really good. He gains plenty of meters off the half back line, so he's good for movement, but doesn't intercept the ball aerially enough. And if I was going to say anything about this starting lineup that I've got of small defenders of Nankervis, McElhaney, and Hinge, it's probably a little bit tall. You haven't got any really small player to play on some of the goal sneak type from the opposition. So that's something the Crows, they don't have a lot of balance there, and they might have to bring someone in like a Parnell at times. But I think this is the best, at least on paper, the best sort of starting three. The other one that I've got that I wouldn't mind seeing a little bit of at AFL level is Oscar Ryan, who's playing SANFL at the moment. Picked 27 in 2023, so another one that we probably need to see at AFL level. I think his ball use is a little bit of a concern. He averages 19 touches and he gives a lot of run off that half back line. Like, his strength is his athleticism to get up and down the ground and be that link between defense and offense. But yeah, it does shank the ball a little bit and is more of a meters gained as opposed to a ball retention player, not hitting those corridor kicks at the moment. So that's the part of his game that will have to get better, but I think you could give him some, at least off the bench time in 2025 and try and get some exposure into him. Other than that, you've got Patrick Parnell, you've got Wayne Miller, you've got Will Hamill, Hugh Bond, and Brodie Smith, who I think for various roles could come into the starting lineup throughout the season. I don't really know what to do with Wayne Miller at the moment. 27 years of age, 3 games last season, pretty injury prone, just not sure what happens with him. He's contracted until 2025. So one more year on the deal, and he's a really tricky one. I think Hugh Bond has played some football this season, and he could be one that he's played good SANFL football as well, has Hugh Bond. So he could get some game time throughout the season, as could Patrick Parnell, particularly for a good matchup. But those are the players at this point that I'm starting for the 2025 season to try to get the most talent on the field that we can. We go then to the midfield group, and this is the part that I put somewhere between the recruiting and on Matthew Nicks. I think he plays a really boring mix of midfielders, and particularly at the start of the season when he was just rolling out Dawson, Laird, and Matt Crouch. Like Dawson's an absolute gun. I love him as that bigger bodied player that just like runs the lines, has that penetrative left boot. But like Crouch had an amazing season too. Like don't get me wrong, but I think you got to move past Rory Laird. We'll get into that. I just want to go through the drafting. So I have this juxtaposed between Matthew Nicks and the recruiting here with the midfield. Like 2016, Jordan Gallucci, pick 15, delisted. Miles Paholke, another mid forward, pick 44, delisted. Matthew Signorella, a mid, pick 62, delisted. So they haven't been able to hit with the high end of the draft with this midfielder that they need. And that's why they're pretty lucky that they were able to get Dawson because he's absolutely carrying this midfield. I think the one that absolutely kills them was the 2018 draft, which is the draft. You could have had like a Zach Butters and you went Chase Jones. You could have had Jai Caldwell, Jordan Clark, a couple of misses there. And then 2019 as well was the Fisher McCasey pick 6 draft. And that one was a really, really strong draft. So you had Hayden Young, Caleb Sarong, Flanders, Green, Cozzy Pickett, Will Day, Waitman, players that you could have picked up there and just missed with that pick 6. So like that one, whether that comes down to the mentality, the psychology of the players that they were looking at, they certainly got that one wrong. And that's hurting this midfield, particularly with the high-end midfielders that they could have got there. As I said, the trade period's been really kind to them. They've had players want to come to the club, come back home, and they've been able to capitalise on that. And you got to give credit to the recruiters for that, but that's not your, and that's where like the whole thing is just a bit of a mess, like development. You can't really give credit to the development team for the Jordan Dawsons and the Isaac Rankins because they would develop that other teams essentially. So this midfield, we've got to activate a draft pick here going forward. We're going to activate pick 4 and we're going to try to bring in an absolute blue chip midfielder into this mix to give the Crows some bite because they've been boring. They've been conservative in the 2024 season. And I'm going with pick 4. If he's available, I'm taking Sid Draper, the South Australian, the local boy. You're not going to have any worries with the go-home factor, but he is the best on talent as well. You're not doing it purely for the go-home factor. He's one of the most direct, damaging, destructive clearance midfielders in this draft. I think his balance of power and speed, sort of alongside the fact that he's not a giant, he's not a bludgeoning midfielder. I don't think Adelaide need that with the current players, with, putting Curtin into the midfield mix, Dawson, you've got big bodies. You need a smaller player, an agile player, and a player with that class, that ball use that Sid Draper has going inside forward 50. Now, there is a slight chance that Draper is not available. He's not still on the board at pick 4. So then what do? It's going to come down to what other teams do. I think, Richmond are more likely to take a Finn O'Sullivan or a Jagger Smith with a pick 1, which is then going to leave teams like North Melbourne and West Coast. I don't think North Melbourne are going to take Sid Draper. I think North Melbourne at this point are more likely to take somebody like Harvey Langford, perhaps, a bigger bodied midfielder, maybe a Josh Smiley. As Luke Traynor continues, he's been very injury prone this season with the concussions, and I think that's going to be too much of a worry to take him at pick 2, which I'd love for that to happen. I think that's a match made in heaven. I'm going off on a massive tangent here. So if Sid Draper's not available, you're probably going to have one of Finn O'Sullivan or Jagger Smith still available, and you're just going to take whichever one of those is still available if Sid Draper's not there. But I think Sid Draper has to be the priority here. I think the next one for me, I'd take is Finn O'Sullivan and then Jagger Smith. So Draper, for the Crows anyway, Draper, Finn O'Sullivan and Jagger Smith. It's going to be that replacement for Rory Laird, Matt Crouch, those types of players. So we'll come into back to the current situation, back to reality. What is the midfield going to look like? Jordan Dawson, he's your ball carrier. He is not necessarily your best clearance player and first hands on the ball, but he's the guy that you give the ball to, the handball receive player. He gets you inside 50, he gets you deep, and you can lock the ball inside 50. He averages 505 metres gained, 70% disposal efficiency, that beautiful left kick, 5.7 score involvements, and 4 intercept possessions. Those taller mids bring that as well. They can strip the ball off the opposition. He does that brilliantly. Captain, gun, love Jordan Dawson. We don't really have to talk about him too much more. Isaac Rankin just had such an annoying season with the with a suspension first and then getting knocked out himself. Just never really got going. But when he played, he was breathtaking. 15 games, highest ranked player at the club over 2024, according to Champion Data player rating. So he was so prolific, so productive. 24 years of age, perfect age profile. He's just got to go into that midfield. He'll obviously play a little bit forward, rest forward as well, but he's got to be in that midfield mix in 2024. Jake Saligo is now just a given. 21 years of age, another amazing age profile player, 23 games, pick 36 in the 2021 draft, and I think he can just keep getting better and better. He only had 73% time on ground in 2024. You'd want that to get closer to 80 in the next season. Averaged 23 disposals as well, which you just expect to get a little bit closer to that 30 mark as he plays more time on ground and just gets the endurance levels up. Contracted now until 2029. You got to build this midfield around Dawson, Rankin, Saligo, Draper, and the wild card player who adds flexibility to this team overall, but can also make an impact as a big-bodied mid. It's Dan Curtin, 197 centimetres, pick 8 in the 2023 draft. Was a slow start, and it usually is for a player of that height. They don't have the impact that a 180 centimetre mid has, like a Riley Sanders of last year, for example, a Colby McKercher. I think Curtin has enormous upside, and just to come in, I think this season, I don't think he's going to be playing at every centre bounce or anything like that, but he can play midfield time, and then he can go behind the ball. He can assist with that intercept marking that they need. He can probably play a little bit of wing as well, just to be that aerial presence when you're exiting defence, being up the line player. He's so good overhead. He's got to be in this team in 2025. That's just pretty much simple, which leaves the rest of the midfielders. And I know this is going to be a debatable point, the Matt Crouch one. He is the best one of the best first hands players in the comps. Gathers from hitouts 3.0, which is first at the club. Competition fourth, that is. So he's the fourth best player at the club at getting his hands on the ball first. His 5.9 clearances are first at the club. His 8.3 ground balls are first at the club. His 12.5 contested possessions are first at the club. And his 6.3 score involvements are second at the club. The problem for me with Matt Crouch is you almost need him to be the defensive anchor of the midfield when you've got and have two other more damaging, more penetrative players like Dawson, like Rankin in the midfield mix. You need him to be the Rowbottom or the Willem Drew type defensive midfielder, and he doesn't do that. He doesn't tackle. He doesn't have a defensive bone in his body. He's only a player with ball in hand. And you don't want the ball in his hand. So he wins the ball. He does all that amazingly, but you don't want the ball in his hand. So I feel like it's really harsh to not have him in the best 22, and he's done such a good job to get back into this team after what happened in 2023. But I just ultimately think Adelaide are a better team without him. And I don't know, is there potential you could get some draft capital for him maybe? I don't think teams would want to pay a lot for him, but I'd probably just want to just start over with this midfield and just get some more interest, some more intrigue, and some more magic, I guess, into that midfield mix. You've got Charlie Edwards, who's a good young developing midfielder as well, 191 centimetres, a good size, picked 21 in the 2023 draft. I think he's got plenty of potential. Saw a bit of his SANFL form, and he looks like a good player. Don't have him in the starting lineup as yet. The others are Rory Laird. I don't know what to do with him. 31 years of age. I just think he's just a pretty average player, really. He's done a good job. He's forged a good career. I don't think you really want to play him off half back. Like some of the efforts in the back end of the season, I watched the majority of Adelaide's games since about round 14, and some of his efforts were really poor. Missed tackles, turning the ball over when he was playing half back. I just don't think he's really good enough, and I think he's probably just got to go. Contracted until 2026. I don't know, play him in the sample. And then Rory Sloane obviously retired there through this season, so he's still on the list. You go to the wings. You got Lockie Scholl there. I think he's still doing a pretty good job on the wing. Contracted until 2026. Chase Jones, contracted until 2026. I don't love Chase Jones as a player, but he probably does a reasonable job as a wingman. I think in 2023 he had a really good season and just dropped off in 2024, just 16 games. Not sure if that was injury related or not, but yeah, just didn't put it together. And that brings us to the small and medium forwards, the attacking phase of the ground. Really need to get this forward line in sync with the midfield. And the first one that has to be in this team for me is Josh Rachele as I mentioned it at the start off the top, the Harry Sheezel role. He's the most elusive, most mercurial, smoothest moving, best ball user, goal sneak, whatever you want to call it. He does all of that stuff. He's just so nice to watch, Josh Rachele. 21 years of age. He's still pretty young, so I think it's tough to pin a lot of this stuff on him. I don't think it's really been fair this season, albeit granted, I'll take the, poor contest efforts throughout the season, but he's a magical footballer, and I think he still needs a chance. He's contracted until 2029, just needs to put that season behind him and just start over and play some good footy. Ben Keys, he was absolutely wicked this season, still just 27 years of age. He's actually a bit younger than I thought. 23 games. I think he was one of Adelaide's best players. If you probably go Rankin 1, Dawson 2, I don't know, was Keys 3rd? I can't think of anyone off the top of my head that was actually above him, but I think he was probably the 3rd best player in 24. Contracted until 2027. He just gets in this team because he's just a good player. Zach Taylor, who I absolutely loved I think he played the final 9 games pretty much back-to-back. Might have been the sub a few times, so the numbers didn't look too good. Just looks really good. Looks like a really contested, loves the contest as a small forward, but he's willing to do that work that the high half forward needs. He looks like that player that Adelaide really are searching for when you've got a half forward like a Josh Rachele, who's an absolute ball-in-hand guy. He's not going to give you too much defensively. Zach Taylor is a player that is going to give you that defensive work, and he's really dangerous when the ball hits the ground as well. So someone that seems very versatile to me, that looks like he can play at SA NFL level, played a bit of midfield. He's got the tank to be able to do that and play that high half forward role really well. The next one there, and a player that will just come in off the bench, he won't be in the top 3 small forwards, but Sam Berry, I still think there's a player in him. I think he's really dynamic and explosive and can play that combination of see ball, get ball, and defensive role half forward. You can bring him for stints in the midfield, and he can impact with the big body. He can break tackles. He can draw players towards him, and I think there's something in that and something in the way that Adelaide are going to want to play. They want those dynamic players. Luke Pedler's another one, but I've got Berry coming in off the bench. Pick 28 in 2020, so there is a player there, contracted until 2026. I hope Berry can turn it around. And the other one coming off the bench there would be Billy Dowling. So I think he definitely gets more games. He had 9 games at the end of this season as well. Omitted a few times and played sub, but I think he was impressive, and he'd be one on the precipice in 2025. Then we've got the sort of leftover small forwards that aren't getting into the team. We've got Braden Cook there, who was picked 25 in 2020. Didn't love what I saw from him. He played 15 games this season. Definitely a player there, but wasn't a massive fan. I don't think he gets into the starting team just yet. Harry Schoenberg just hasn't shown enough for a while. I know he's had problems with his body, but yeah, 4 games. He's just not there at the moment. Carl Gallagher, haven't seen enough of him as a Cat B rookie. Then you've got Lachlan Murphy, Luke Pedler, and Ned McHenry, who I haven't got in the starting small forwards at the moment, but particularly Luke Pedler of that list, I think he's the one that can sort of step up. And then the key forwards, you've got Riley Thilthorpe, who I think is going to explode in the next couple of seasons. Pick 2 in 2020, only 22 years of age, key forward, 201 centimetres. He's an absolute monster. He's going to be clunking marks for the next 5 to 10 years. We've just got to harness this guy and just so that he can play some consistent football to actually get some continuity in his game, I suppose is what I'm trying to say. Contract in 2028. The other one is Darcy Fogarty, who he's that perfect third tall type, dynamic, explosive, picked 12 in 2017, as we said, contracted just until next year, so that's a little bit of a worry, but he's definitely the next one. And I think you've still got to go here as as a second tall Taylor Walker, who has signed for one more season, still playing well enough, albeit wasn't the best season in 2024, but still playing well enough, and he should be able to get to 300 games next year. And then that leaves the players missing from the key forwards: Elliot Himmelberg, Chris Burgess, Lockie Gallant, and Toby Murray there. So they won't be, at least in the starting team for the 2024 season. The Rucks, I think you still got to go with Riley O'Brien. He's a pretty decent tap ruckman. Doesn't give you a hell of a lot outside the stoppage source, but he's 29 years of age. He's probably still got a few good seasons in him. And then you've got Kieran Strawn there just as backup playing SANFL level, who's probably too good for that level, but I'm still not sure he gets in over Riley O'Brien, so I think you stick there. And I think the ruck is where we want to be going to the draft, and Adelaide have that pick in the 20s. I think this could be the moment for the Crows to pick up another local ball. They could get the double here, get Sid Draper at pick 4 and grab Alex Dodson with their pick. It is pick 24, isn't it? I just got to double check that. 25, pick 25. They've also got pick 34 there as well. Now they're going to have to give something up for Alex Nilbullen. I think that's probably pick 34, which leaves them just with 25 and 44. I think pick 25, they go for Alex Dodson, who is the he's the best ruckman in this draft, but he's also the most athletic, tall, basketball background. He's actually still deciding whether he wants to nominate for the draft or pursue a career in basketball. He's got some unbelievable skill. He was really exciting for South Australia at the National Championships. And if they want to build from the midfield out and have a really dominant, athletic ruckman that can impact around the ground as well, Alex Dodson certainly could be that if he chooses football. So I'm going with activating the pick there, Alex Dodson at pick 25. You then get Tyler Welsh that will get a bid probably somewhere between pick 30 and 50 in there. That'll get eaten up with the pick 44 that Adelaide have that will add to the list. So looking at the departures overall, so trades, I've gone with Matt Crouch. Super harsh, I know, but I just think this team needs to move past him. So you can see what you can get from a trade capital point of view. Move to the delistings. I think Ned McHenry's on the chopping board. Hasn't really been able to establish himself in this team. Harry Schoenberg is another one that just hasn't been able to, put it all together, and he's been on the list for quite a while. Free those list spots up and bring players in through the draft and the free agency period, whether that's Alex Nilbullen, Jack Lukosius, some of those players as well, plus the draftees in Dodson, Draper, and Welsh all coming in there that are going to add some much needed dynamism to this team. So we'll have a quick look at the best 22 to finish off there. So in the defence from the key defenders, you got Nick Murray, Josh Worrell, and Mark Keane. The smaller defenders, the running ones, and the medium interceptors, you've got Nang Curvis, Max Michelini, and Mitch Hinge, as well as Oscar Ryan off the bench. Then your midfield, you've got Jordan Dawson, Isaac Rankin, Jake Saligo as the starting three, with Dan Curtin and Sid Draper, the new draftee, coming in. Then we've got as the wings, Lockie Scholl and Chase Jones, facilitating those areas. Rachele, Keys, and Zach Taylor as the forwards, with Berry and Dowling being options there off the bench as well. Then for your key forwards, you've got Riley Thilthorpe, Darcy Fogarty, and I think Taylor Walker will be in and out. Probably won't be able to play full amount of games in 2025, but he'll definitely be a presence there. And then the Rucks, we're just going with Riley O'Brien. Alex Dodson, the developing ruck, he probably won't be playing games in 2025, but certainly a project for the future as Riley O'Brien ages out. That is the best 22 up on the screen at the moment, best 23 as it is now with a sub. That is a wrap for the video, guys. I hope you enjoyed. And of course, if you agree or you disagree or you think I got anything wrong, let me know down in the comments. I tried to cover this one as good as I could by watching as much SANFL and AFL footage as I possibly could. But it's always hard to know someone's club as well as they do. So keep that in mind. But anyway, guys, that's all for today, and I'll see you next time.